I can see that we have present councillors Anderson, Barker, Cowie, Dewar, Johnson Dempsey, Kerr, Mars, McCreary, McLachlan and Ray. We also have a number of officers in attendance today, and with that I'll pass you back to the Chair to commence today's business. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Elizabeth Ann. Is there any declarations of interest? Don't see any. Minutes of the previous meeting, that's pages 3 to 10. I'll move that as a correct record.
I'll second that.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, could I ask a
Yeah,
question on
sure.
systems working?
Yeah, but a wee second, Ralph, just because is there people? Have you tried, is your card in? Yeah?
Oh, it's coming on.
Is the card right in, Ralph?
But can just carry on. Just a question on the fatalities.
Uh-huh.
Is that all or just South Lanarkshire roads? Does it include the motorway for those fatalities? I presume it does. It does, yes. Thank you.
Okay. Right, have we got a bit of a technical problem here because...
Oh, bear with me a second.
Did yours like this, Stuart?
Is yours working? No.
Stuart Laird requested there and that's what...
Yeah. So is it the same for all councillors then?
Uh-huh.
Is yours working? Try yours, Colin, Sandy. Yeah.
I wonder if it's because I've dragged names to those seats.
Oh, I see, right, you drag those ones in then.
Because the office, but it worked for one of Helen's meetings, so I'm not sure. Do you want to adjourn for a few moments to
we might
try
as well,
and
because,
sort the questions out, because it won't, obviously.
We can hear you in the room, and that's fine, but there's... Pause for a wee minute till we get through some procedures to fix the problem. Somebody rejoined online then?
Yes.
Okay. So Ralph, you had a question and it was answered, I think. But just for the sake of the members that might not have heard that, could you repeat that question then, please, Ralph? The members online, I mean.
Right, thanks, Chair. It was just on the fatalities in the minutes. Just to confirm that the fatalities were all South Lanarkshire roads, including the motorway.
Stuart Laird.
Yes, I can confirm that that is the case. It's all road accidents within South Lanarkshire, including the fatalities. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So we agreed that no more questions on the minute. Item 3 on the agenda is approach to casualty reduction, and I'm going to ask Stuart Laird, Sandy Carroll and Colin Smith. I think they're all going to have an input here, am I right? Over to you, chaps. Stuart to begin. It's not as a...
All right.
Okay, thanks very much, Chair. The purpose of this presentation is to inform the forum of the background into our approach towards casualty reduction. We'll take you through the annual assessment process, followed by looking at detailed assessments of 2 locations, and we'll take you through the resultant reports, looking at the detailed design options that were considered for the resultant works, and then we'll continue into the monitoring process as well. So moving to the next slide, members will be aware that under Section 39 of the Road Traffic Act 1988, this requires all local authorities to undertake studies into the cause of accidents on roads within our area and to take appropriate measures to prevent these. In addition, a local authority must prepare and carry out a programme of measures designed to promote road safety. And through the efforts of the Council, as well as working in partnership with various bodies such as Police Scotland, etc., then we look to show a decrease in accidents. Seem to have a technical issue at the moment. We've got a technical issue at the moment.
I'll try it again. Yeah, we're good now. We're able to control it now.
Right, so do you want the picture back?
We've got one on.
Oh, is yours? Yeah, okay, perfect.
Okay, that's us settled again. Apologies for that. The graph on the screen at the moment shows that with working in partners, you can see there's been a steady decline in casualties within South Lanarkshire. In addition to that, our current local transport strategy identifies a number of road safety policies and actions, and it's anticipated that with our forthcoming new strategy, there'll obviously be similar policies and actions there. In terms of accidents themselves, we define those as being rare, random and multi-factor events. Therefore, a minimum number of accidents that will allow for a statistically significant treatable accident pattern is identified as being three accidents themselves. On an annual basis, usually around about this time of year, we undertake a council-wide analysis of every road accident and casualty that's reported to Police Scotland. There are broadly two types of locations that we undertake this assessment of, and these are looking at cluster sites or single accident sites where there's 3 or more injury accidents occurring within the last three-year period. And in addition to that, we also look at accident rates per 100 million kilometres on each of our rural A and B class routes. And again, that's over a 3-year period. From this assessment, a number of locations are taken forward to detailed accident investigation and then forward on to road improvements works where necessary. So I'll pass you over to Sandy now, who will take you through the next part of the process. So, sorry, I'll pass you to Colin.
Okay, thank you. So we'll just put some information together for the two approaches to road casualty investigation that we do undertake. The first one we're going to look at is our single sites and cluster sites. These are sites and locations that include junctions, bends or short lengths of road where there have been 3 or more injury accidents during the previous 3-year period. So that's identified using our software analysis programme that we have at our disposal. So these can be locations at any point within a road network, rural, urban or in between. So an annual assessment identifies locations where 3 or more injury accidents have occurred during the last 3-year period. And once those have been identified, we undertake an initial review of that location and the circumstances behind those accidents. So we're really looking to identify common treatable factors at this stage, or if perhaps these incidents have taken place and the circumstances behind them are things that can't be treated in an engineering or any other fashion. All the sites that are identified are then scored by allocating points to each road traffic collision based on their severity, as well as awaiting for sites within the most deprived 20%, as detailed in the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation. So each fatal accident is awarded 7.1 points, a serious 4.5 points, and a slight 1 point. We'll also look at the casualties involved within each incident, and where at least one vulnerable road user or vulnerable road user group is identified with a killed or seriously injured casualty, then a further doubling up gearing weighting is put against each site's total points. When we're looking at sites with a total of less than 3 points, will not typically be considered for further investigation or action. So these initial investigations at this stage do take cognizance of road traffic collision trends, i.e. increases or decreases when compared to a previous study period if this single site has appeared on the table before. We're also looking at road user types, the causation factors behind these events, using the Stats 19 data that we're provided with by the police, and looking really at all the attributes that have contributed towards these collisions taking place. Also considered at this point are any improvement works that are perhaps planned or imminent in the future. This might be through new residential developments or commercial developments or any other kind of impact upon these areas, perhaps community growth areas. So these things will also be noted at this point. As a result of these investigations and looking into all these details, we produce a priority table of single sites or cluster sites, which contain a list of comments against each site as well. And this is then further discussed and a number of sites then taken forward to a detailed investigation and then road safety improvement works where these are suitable. Any locations not identified for detailed investigation will, however, continue to be monitored. The next one we're going to look at is our rural route assessment.
Can I interrupt just for a moment?
Certainly.
I've been informed that people online that aren't seeing the slides, so I just want to check, because they've been emailed to the members online. Could we pause just for a second, just to make sure that everybody who's listening, if you're listening, check your email and you'll get a copy of the slides sent to you, and that way you can be able to follow. And I see Julia has asked to speak early on, and I'll take Julia because I'm wondering if it's to do with that. Julian?
Thank you, Chair. It was just to highlight that we don't have the slides. I have been frantically checking my emails in case I'd missed one, but I think it's just been a miss. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Julian. Okay, Colin, do you want to just carry on then?
Certainly.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Chair. So we're now looking at our rural route assessments. So an assessment of our rural A and B class routes is undertaken annually by splitting these routes into a number of links. In addition, a few sectors of unclassified rural road that historically have had an accident history are also included, which includes Carscallan Road in Hamilton, Newhouse Mill Road and Molesly Road in Kirklook. In total, we've got 79 links that are assessed on an annual basis. And these are assessed to determine the number of road traffic collisions with personal injury accidents that have occurred during the preceding 3-year period. That is then recorded within the rural route assessment table. The number of accidents is broken down by severity and entered into this table, and we work out the accident rate for each link by calculating the number of injury accidents, the length of road and volume of traffic experienced on that link. And that's then compared to the national accident rate for that type of route. Links are then scored and ranked in a priority table with a number of weightings then being applied. Weightings are applied where a fatal or serious road traffic collision is taking place, as well as where a road user group or age, which is classed as vulnerable, has been incorporated within those casualty figures as well. So weightings or multiplication factors are applied to each route accident rate, and that then produces an upscaled score for each site. So similar to the single sites, a severity weighting is based on the highest severity road traffic collision within each link, and it's a multiplication factor for each severity applied to the route accident rate. It's a factor of 7.1 for fatal, 4.5 for serious, and again just 1 for slight, if that is the highest severity that's been experienced on that link. So that multiplication factor is based on the comparative cost to society as a result of injury collisions, and that has been based upon work undertaken by road safety professionals and statisticians. A further doubling gearing factor is applied where at least one vulnerable road user or age group has resulted in a killed or seriously injured accident within that link. So again, just to detail, the vulnerable road users and age groups are pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists, road users aged 70 and over, and road users between 17 years and 25 years old. So if there's a killed or seriously injured casualty involved in these, then that will be included within the gearing factors within this process. So again, a review of these links and the accidents that have occurred is undertaken. We interrogate the Stats 19 data provided by the police to identify if there's anything common that's apparent across these links. And we look at the causation factors and the circumstances that the police have recorded, and again to see if these could potentially be treated by engineering measures, or where some of these things have taken place by circumstances out of anyone's control that could not be mitigated against. So finally, the priority table is ranked by overall weighted totals, and then each link is discussed in order to identify links for detailed investigation and potential mitigation works to improve road safety. So I'll now pass you on to Sandy to take you through a detailed assessment example.
Thanks, Colin. Sandy?
Thank you. So I'm going to take you through a detailed assessment process, and then I'll follow up with a couple of examples that we've done in previous years. So the assessment process I'm going to take you through is for the location at Burnbank Road in Hamilton. This was identified as part of the process that Colin's just taken us through. So you'll see from the slide, hopefully you've all got that in front of you. The table you're seeing is the information that Police Scotland note down when they attend injury accidents. Now it's called the Stats 19. So that information includes the date, the time of day, the lighting conditions, the weather conditions, direction of travel, and causation factors. And there, you can see from that example, there was 17 injury accidents occurred within a 3-year period, and that's why it was highlighted in the AIP report. The map below shows the study area for this exercise. The executive summary is a high-level summary and it details the location, the accident history and any vulnerable road users. I won't bore you by reading it all, but more detail will come out in the following slides. So the accidents that we're detailing, that we're investigating are highlighted in this table. And what this identifies is the number of killed and seriously injured accidents compared to all accidents in that section of road. For this particular area, you'll see there was a percentage, 36.1% of the total accidents in this location were those killed or seriously injured, which is lower than the Scottish average of 38.8%. The same exercise is done for accidents that happen in dark or light conditions, and for this location the ratio was 30.9% were in the dark, which is slightly higher than the Scottish average, and that's something that gets investigated later on in this exercise. The wet-dry ratio is also looked at. In this instance, 40% were in the wet, slightly higher than the Scottish average. And then you can see where we note the accidents according to the time of day, the day of the week and the month of the year. And that's for us to identify if there's any patterns. Are the accidents happening in the AM peak, the PM peak? Is it school times? Is it weekend traffic? Or winter months or summer months? You can see from this example that there's 5 accidents occurred in January, which may highlight something to be investigated in further detail, but you can also see from this there wasn't a high rate of accidents in either February or December, which perhaps rules out it being a winter weather condition. So on to the deep analysis. So all the accidents are looked at, and what we're looking at is patterns. Is there any patterns, causation factors identified that a treatable option can be identified to reduce the likelihood of reoccurrence? So the highlights from this section are paragraph 5.7.3. We can say 8 of the 17 accidents occurred during hours of darkness. So that's something to be looked at. The next accident says the most accidents occurred during the month of January. So again, as mentioned earlier, could that have a significant impact? And in section 5.9.3, you'll note 8 of the accidents involved pedestrians. 1 of these was fatal, and 2 involved serious injury. So that's really the other stats that we looked into. Didn't show such a high bias for any particular group or pattern. So there's various options for treating accidents, and we need to make sure that what's recommended for treatment is the appropriate option to target the areas happening in any specific location. As mentioned before, the light and dark ratio was fairly high, so that was looked into in detail, and it was noted during the investigation that there was some street lamps were out during the investigation, so those street lamps were repaired. And that will be monitored to ensure that accident rates decrease as a result. With 8 of the 17 accidents involving pedestrians, it would appear that measures to prevent that happening are warranted. 2 pedestrian accidents occurred in the dual carriageway section, which is signalised pedestrian crossings at each end. Measures highlighted in the previous paragraph would help reduce these. That's the street lighting. 4 pedestrian accidents occurred in the Pollock Avenue to Clydesdale Street section, and the recent resurfacing combined with the measures highlighted with the street lighting may help to reduce these accidents. However, consideration should be given to providing controlled crossings. And that takes us on to the recommended treatment. And the recommended treatment was to install pedestrian crossing facilities in the form of zebra crossings along the length of Burnbank Road, starting at Whitehill Road, to mitigate the number of pedestrian accidents. It's our intention to phase these works, and if you're local to the area, you'll know the first zebra crossing has recently been completed on Whitehills Road, The next pedestrian crossing, which is on Burnbank Road at the petrol station, will be commencing in January. The remaining 2 zebra crossings will be implemented in future years depending upon funding. So just the plan there showing the location of those measures. As I said, the zebra on location 1 is complete. Zebra 2 will be happening at the start of the next calendar year, and 3 and 4 will happen in future years. We also carry out an economic assessment, and that just shows there is an economic benefit to doing it. So the table you're seeing there highlights the cost to society of different types of accidents. Now, for a fatal accident in a built-up road, the cost to society is over £2 million. For this exercise, what we use is the average cost for all accidents in built-up roads. And you can see that with 17 accidents so over the 3-year period, and the average cost being £145,000 per accident, the cost is over £1 million over the 3 years, or £337,000 per year. So the cost of introducing the measures that we recommended was £240,000, which is returned a predicted first-year rate of return to be £337,000 or 140%. The next slides just show you some images of the before and after. As you can see, before it was uncontrolled, there was a pedestrian refuge island, and the next picture shows the completed works, the zebra crossing with the parallel crossing for cyclists. And just a couple more images. The next one shows the accessibility features, the tactile paving for blind or partially sighted pedestrians. So I hope that helps understand and show you a bit of detail in what goes into these reports and how we devise the measures to be implemented. The next slide is a different location. This is on A73 in Thankerton, which is a rural area. It's a crossroads and the main junction to reach both Thankerton from the A73 and also to reach Dintle Hill. You can see from the table, from the Stats 19 information, there'd been 9 accidents on this section of road to be investigated, and the next slides just show the measures that were proposed and have now been implemented. These include the centre line of the road, which previously had been a mixture of double solid white lines and warning road markings. The double solid white lines were extended to prevent overtaking on the approach to the junction. We added some warning signage and some vehicle activated signage, so when there's vehicles exiting the side roads, drivers on the main through road get warned about that and can take appropriate action as necessary. And anti-skid surfacing was also provided at the junction. So the results of that were that there's been no injury accidents, or sorry, I think there's been 1 injury accident. I'm getting lost here in my slides, excuse me. Let's go. Sorry, there was the final piece of measure was for police enforcement. There'd been an issue of police enforcement in that area. They had been using the tea rooms car park on occasion to carry out speed enforcement, but at times when the car park was busy or they weren't able to get in for various reasons, so we provided an enforcement lay-by for police vehicles. And there's been a dramatic decrease in accidents since those measures were provided. And I will just go on to the final. This was the A72. This is a rural route accident location. It went from the council boundary to the M74 junction 14. It was a very long route, and various types of accidents were happening. So we looked at this route as a whole. Various measures were introduced to reduce the accidents on this section of road. including in the first group of measures you can see is on the approach to the village of Elvenfoot, which is a 40-mile-an-hour speed limit within the built-up area. So we beefed up the gateway features to make it more evident to drivers that they're approaching a slower speed limit area and built-up area. We provided 3, 2, 1 countdown signage and dragon's teeth markings. As you move into the more rural section of the route, you can see where there was tight bends, we introduced bend warning signage and slow markings. The bend warning signs are only provided after the severity of the bend is measured, and that's to ensure we don't have bend warning signs at some bends and then other more severe bends might not have signage. It's all about providing a consistent approach, and so drivers are aware of what they might be approaching once they pass a warning signage. The next group of measures shows what we did within the built-up area of Elvenfoot, within the reduced speed limit area, and that was we provided repeater signage and road markings throughout the area. There was a tight bend and a narrow section of road at the bridge. We provided warning signage for that as well. And just to conclude, all rural route links, they're monitored annually, as Colin took us through that process earlier. The single cluster sites are continued to be monitored until they're no longer required. That is, their accident statistics reduced to the extent where they drop off the radar, and trends identified within annual analysis, and any new emerging issues are considered at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Quite a long and very detailed report there, and it's quite difficult to try and sort of take all of that in as it's going on, and I'm pretty sure there's questions from members following that report. I've got some questions myself, but I'm going to ask members first before I come in. I've got a few. Carl Johnson Dempsey.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I am a regular user of Burnbank Road and Whitehill Road, and just want to commend the work. So it's not a question; it's more just a commendation. As a regular user on a motorcycle as well, I see quite often pedestrians kind of darting between cars to cross Whitehill Road at the previous island, and the new zebra crossing with Alicia Beatings has made quite a difference. So yeah, just to commend the work, and that's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Julia Mars.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, again, a lot of good work, and good to see a reduction in the accidents. I'm quite conscious, especially in the rural area where street lighting is well, more sporadic, I think would be the term, that the characteristics of areas can change significantly at night, and a lot of the particularly village characteristics that have been installed can be very effective through the day, but at night are less effective. And I wonder, going forward, whether paints could be fluorescent so that the headlights of oncoming vehicles might pick up on those characteristics a bit more. I think that there is also an issue of around the schools, if we could look at that for more fluorescent paints if available.
Thanks, Julia. Sandy?
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, as we went over in the report there, the light and dark issue is something that we do look at in great detail. With regards to the paints that we use on the road, there is the paint that we do use, it does have glass beads in it, designed to reflect car headlights, and also the traffic signs are obviously retroflective as well for the same purpose. We do monitor the market, you know, we keep abreast of new technologies, and anything that comes our way, we do investigate use if it would provide any benefit. So no, valid points from Councillor Mars, and something that we do continually try and keep on top of.
Julia, do you want to come back?
Yes, please. What I would say, and I do accept that the paints have a level of sort of chips in them that fluoresce, but the roads get mucky, and I know that I'm not expecting the roads to be cleaned, so I wonder whether there's anything better product that could, you know, could prevent that, because to start with, yes, it looks really bright and characteristic, but on especially a rural road, you know, it maybe needs a product that's going to stand up to road dirt going forward to enhance that. Also for bollard painting with fluorescent paint, you know, it's not just the road markings, but I think the characteristics could be better made through the night. And also, and it's not quite for this paper, but it's aligned with it. In terms of the installation of pedestrian crossings, I'm very much in favour of that. And whilst we absolutely have to direct resources where there is there has been serious and death injury accidents, then is there a going forward a proposal to look at the pedestrian crossings where there's an expectation of needing to cross in town centres around schools?
I see Colin Park has joined us while he's actually on holiday, might add. Well done, Colin, and thank you for coming in. So you want to address Julia's comment there?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Councillor McLachlan. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yep.
The latter point, I believe that for Stuart, but it was just kind of pick up on the lining issue. This has been a kind of problem we've been wrestling with for many years. The lead content was taken out of some of this material about 10, 15 years ago. So we've been kind of trying, with not a lot of success to be honest, to have more durable lining. Colleagues in Transport Scotland and Trunk Road Authority are wrestling with the same problem as well. So bottom line is, it does need just greater levels of investment to go back and line. Sadly, we can't keep all our roads clean, but we can try and maintain them as much as we can and have a kind of series of more comprehensive refurbishment programmes. So it is a problem that we've been having for years. Just in terms of kind of this presentation that the guys have done this morning, I know it was a bit detailed, but it was to try and perhaps maybe a bit too detailed, but it was to try and get the point across of the work that we do. I'm sure each councillor on the call today will have plenty of letters from me saying, sorry, we can't do something. But this was to try and demonstrate what we do and what we go into in terms of the level of detail to interrogate the data that we get from Police Scotland. So hopefully it's went down well today. I appreciate the kind of positive comments that we've had. And if there's any particular areas, for all the work that we've done this year and in previous years, we'll have a kind of complementary report similar to what Sandy took you through for people to look into, and allows us to go back at a later date as well to actually do a bit of check on it in terms of what we thought was going to happen, what the first year rate of return is going to be as well. So that's just what we use to direct our investment. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Colin. Is somebody, Stuart Laird?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. In terms of the second part to Councillor Marr's question there, you'll probably all be aware that we've undertaken a series of active travel studies throughout South Lanarkshire over the last few years. And when it comes to looking at pedestrian movements, that is something that we have taken into account as part of that body of work. And it is something that when we are looking at casualty reduction, we're also looking at what other opportunities there are out there to bring in, particularly funding, where we can improve the overall network, and again looking at it from a casualty reduction perspective as well.
Thanks, Stuart. I've got Ralph Barker.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, as a year ago, the improvement in casualty rates, I mean, it's quite remarkable how it's come down over the last 18 years. I mean, I'm sure the roads have done a big part of that. I wonder if some of it is improvement in safety equipment in cars. Just trying to work out the difference between car occupants and pedestrians. So, I mean, that really is I mean, whichever way you look at it, it's good news. I did notice two of the examples for assessment is in O2 at Elvenfoot and Sankerton Crossroads. Have long been accident areas of contention, and we do hope there has been an improvement. I can remember 20 years ago, certainly in regional council days, representatives would come out and tell us there was no problem at Elvenfoot, despite all the car bumpers and lying at the side of the road. So I'm really pleased that these sites have been looked at and assessed. Thank you.
Thanks very much. There's no one else. I've got a couple of questions. The cost, it was either Sandy or Colin was speaking about, I think it was Sandy, but the cost, when you think of the cost of an accident, how do you calculate that? You may have touched on it, but how do you bore down onto that? And I'm just interested in how that figure, you arrive at that figure.
Yeah, the figure is published annually by Transport Scotland within their reported Road Casualty Scotland publication. So it is put together by statisticians, can never say that word easily, looking into the cost of the personal cost of an accident happening in terms of loss of earnings, damage to vehicles, the attendance of emergency services to the area as well, and the cost of a local authority come in to make the area safe, doing repairs, etc. So it's a kind of whole social economic cost that's put together. It's one of these ones that does get reviewed on an annual basis and published annually to reflect inflation rates and things as well. So it's an all-encompassing cost, not just a kind of physical cost of the accident happening.
I think most people would be shocked when they've seen the actual individual accident on average cost. That's quite surprising. Burnbank Road, I welcome, and for the record everyone, Burnbank Road is in the middle of my ward. It's not because I'm the chair of the Road Safety Forum. I was unaware of a lot of this that was getting taking place, so just declaring that straight away. Burnbank Road, where the pedestrian crossing is being planned, the third one, Stuart, it's close to where Fullwood Industrial Estate is. Right at that island there, it's quite tricky because the bus stop is very close to the island, and often when cars are passing the bus, if it stops at the bus stop, there's a very little gap that you've got to get past the bus. If the bus starts to move, you're kind of stuck out there. And while I'm speaking about that, on Straven Road, there's another bus stop, and when it stops at the bus stop, there's an island right next to it, and the traffic just comes to a complete halt. It's just a bit of, I think a wee bit of better plan would have avoided that happening. I wonder if that could be looked at. Carscallan Road, you mentioned Carscallan Road being a road where there is quite a bit of accidents there. Now, there's something I raised a while back, and it's probably just went by the by, but last week I was speaking to Colin. He phoned me about something, and we were speaking about Carscallan Road. But on Carscallan Road, where there's close to the farm, there's a double bend with a very narrow bridge, and I believe it's a single track because there's no white lines in the centre. But if you're coming from Quarter to that double bend with the narrow bridge, there's signage to tell you there's a double bend and the road narrows from both sides. But coming the opposite direction, there's no signage, but it's an exact mirror image. So I wonder why there's signage at one side but not at the other. I think I did mention this a while back. Sure, I wonder if you could take a wee note of that and address that. The next question I've got, I'm sorry if I'm piling that on there, that's just some observations here, but I've got a genuine question here. Why a 40 mile an hour, 40 mile an hour in a built up area? It was when you were speaking about, and I may have picked you up wrong, but when you were speaking about in some of the rural areas, you come to areas where you have a 40 in a built up area. I'm always led to believe that it's 30 in a built up area. Sandy?
Yep. We stick to guidelines issued by Transport Scotland for setting local speed limits, and for a 30 mile an hour speed limit, it's a village speed limit, if you like. The definition for village requires there to be a minimum of 20 properties that front that road, over a minimum distance of about 600 metres. So I think it was 11 foot I mentioned in the report. It doesn't meet that criteria. The properties are too few, and the length of the road also doesn't meet the minimum from the guidelines.
Fair enough. It's quite unfortunate for people who live there, you know, because if there's more houses, there's more risk, I suppose. But if one person lives in one house, you know, you just anyway. If that's the guidance, that's the guidance. Another example of that, just on Carscallan Road again, just before you get to Lime Kilburn, it's a 60 miles an hour speed limit right up to the junction of Straven Road, and just before you get to that, there's houses on the left-hand side, and they're reversing out their driveways onto a 60 miles an hour speed limit road. But it's only you could call it a hamlet, I suppose. There's only a few houses there. It's just some of these anomalies that you see things and you think, why would that be there? And rural lighting, Julia asked a question about rural lighting. You don't often see lighting in rural areas, but the point you made about the markings, when markings are new, they're really clear, and then obviously they get dirty. But is there a deterioration happens in the lining where that reflective element sort of deteriorates a bit over time?
Just in terms of some of the speed limit guidance that's issued, you'll be aware through some of the correspondence that we've had that we've also undertaken a speed limit review way back, well, it was probably about 10 years ago now, and that was looking at all our A and B class routes as well. So the rationale behind it is to ensure that no matter where you travel about within the country, that as a driver you're seeing certain characteristics, and you would expect to see certain speed limits associated with that type of characteristic. So where you get to sort of rural areas which maybe don't meet settlement criteria, but there are groupings of houses, then we do consider, depending on the characteristics of that particular section road, then we would look potentially to reduce speed limits. That's not to say that comparing apples with apples, a lot of the characteristics of our settlements or groupings of houses are completely different from each other as well. So we do try and stick right to the guidance to ensure that it is applied appropriately throughout not just South Lanarkshire but colleagues wider as well. In terms of the materials and the sort of how they work over time, yes, there will be parts of the either lining network or signing network that reflectivity will start to fade over time. That's just a natural way of materials, and again we are conscious of that, and there is a body of work that we're undertaking at the moment that's going to replace road studs and elements of signing and lining as part of the sort of casualty reduction exercise that we do. So we are consciously aware of that, and we do tackle areas as well that are shown, we say showing their age.
Yeah, and you mentioned the road studs. I've seen some areas where new road studs are put in place, and it's a really bright reflection you get from them. It's obviously a new technology you're using. And I've seen along the bypass at Edinburgh at some of the main junctions, you've got illuminated studs to help you with the guidance in the lane. That's obviously a very busy road, and probably the volume of traffic warrants that. So thank you very much for those answers. I don't see anyone else. So we don't, this is a presentation, so there's no recommendation. We're just agreeing to note what's been presented to us. Okay with that?
Yeah.
Item 4 on the agenda is 20 mile an hour speed limits. Who am I going to get to go through that? Sandy Carroll. Pages 11 to 19 by the 18.
Thank you.
Sandy.
The purpose of this report is to advise the Forum of progress towards the national strategy for 20 mile an hour speed limits. And the Forum is asked to approve the following recommendations, and that the contents of this report are noted. So by way of background, the Scottish Government launched Scotland's Road Safety Framework to 2030 in 2021. This sets National Guard targets and measures for casualty reduction. Transport Scotland's Strategic Transport Projects Review 2, Phase 1, had previously committed to develop a national strategy for 20 mile an hour zones and limits in Scotland to support a range of policies. So furthermore, the 2021 programme for government committed, we will ensure all appropriate roads and built-up areas have a safer speed limit of 20 mph by 2025. An appropriate road is considered to be all 30 mph roads unless after the road assessment a valid reason is provided as to why they should remain at a speed limit of 30. So the road safety theme policies previously approved within the Council's 2013 to 23 local transport strategy include: the Council will support and encourage driving at 20 mph or below in residential areas and outside schools, which correlates to the above national framework and national strategy for 20 mph. So the national strategy for 20 mph aims to expand 20 mph speed limits across Scotland and will ensure appropriate roads and built areas have a safer speed limit of 20 mph by 2025. In 2022, Transport Scotland wrote to all local authorities asking that a road assessment is undertaken. This was to inform the development of the national strategy for 20 mph and to ensure that a consistent approach was taken across Scotland. Guidance how to undertake the road assessment was also provided by Transport Scotland. This assessment will be used to find out the number of roads affected and financial costs for implementation of the national strategy for 20 mph. So roads required to be assessed against the place criteria provided by Transport Scotland, which indicate which 30 mph roads are considered appropriate for a reduction to 20. So paragraphs 4.7 and 4.8 detail the criteria to assess against. Following the assessment against this criteria, the roads are then grouped into 3 categories. Green are for roads that are suitable for 20 mph with signage alone. Amber, roads may require speed reduction measures after an evaluation of the sign-only setting. And red, these roads will require speed reduction measures as part of the implementation of 20 mph speed limit from the outset. We're going to paragraph 5, the outcomes of the assessment. So the outcomes of the assessment, as dictated by Transport Scotland, and following our assessment of this, resulted in the following. The overall number of existing 20 mph roads remaining at 20 mph was 1,200. The overall number of 20 mph roads changing to a 30 was 0. The number of existing 30 mph roads remaining at 30 was 100, and the number of 30 mph roads changing to a 20 mph speed limit was 4,085. A sense check will be undertaken on all roads identified being suitable for a 20 mph speed limit to ensure a consistent approach is applied across the council area. So the future impacts, the completion of this assessment by all roads authorities in Scotland will shape future national policy and required local actions. Currently, the introduction of a speed limit other than a 30 mph restricted road is subject to the successful promotion of a traffic regulation order. This process can take between 6 and 9 months to complete, and it can be objected to by members of the public as it goes through the consultation process. The Society of Chief Officers of Transportation of Scotland, the Scots Group, is concerned that the TRO approach will complicate the timing of the rollout. It will be down to each council to develop their implementation plan, and the resources available in individual councils is variable. They can foresee a situation where the promotion of many TROs will not be a top priority for a council, and therefore the rollout will be slow, or indeed may not happen. If this were the case, then any advantages of a big bang approach could be lost, or at the very least diluted. A national change to the restricted road speed limit from 30 to 20 mph would forego the requirement to promote a TRO for the restricted roads. A TRO would still be required to introduce 20 mph speed limits on non-restricted roads, those are A and B class roads, and to retain 30 mph speed limits on restricted roads where appropriate. Discussions are still ongoing between Scots and Transport Scotland to determine the best method to progress this project. So, employee implications. An external contractor was appointed to undertake this work, and the study is expected to be complete by the end of this month. Financial implications. Funding of £84,000 was provided to South Lanarkshire Council to undertake this funding. However, significant funding will be required to progress and implement any outcome of this assessment. A similar exercise proposed previously concluded there would be a need to allocate an investment of about £3 million to undertake these works, requiring the need to seek external funding. This figure is likely to be near £4 million today. There's no significant implications in terms of climate change, sustainability, and environmental implications, and there's no significant risk associated with the report. This report does not introduce a new policy function strategy or recommend a change to an existing policy function strategy, and therefore no impact assessment is required. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sandy. Before I ask any, I don't see any hands at the moment anyway, but before I do that, there was quite a discussion taking place at the pre-agenda where the recommendation was to note and support. But personally, I've got a bit of a difficulty with that, and that was discussed with officials. And that, because I can't sit here to move a recommendation support if I don't actually feel that's the case, and I'll elaborate a little bit. Some people may be aware that in Wales, where the 20 mile an hour speed limit was introduced right across the country, it caused quite a bit of a backlash. It was a talking point for a long time. I think it still is, and people are quite upset about it. Now, while I recognise 20 mile an hour speed limits in certain locations as a good thing, but I've got concerns, and I'm interested to see how this develops over time as to what may come back. But the figures are quite stark, as Sandy had just reported on. The fourth bullet point there at 5.4, overall number of existing roads at 30 miles an hour changed to 20 is 4,085, with only 100 remaining. That's only 2% of all the roads remaining at 30. 98% of all the roads will reduce to 20 miles per hour if this report is correct, and if this is what eventually happens. So that does give me quite a bit of concern, and I can see there's some hands coming up already. I suspected this would develop a bit of a debate. So that's my own personal views on it. I've discussed it with officials, so I don't need to ask them any questions, but I'm going to open it up for members. Susan Kerr.
Yeah, just you were talking about your concerns, right? What are your concerns? I don't think you quite said what it was.
So, 20 mile an hour, if people reduce their speed to 20 miles per hour, they're going to be going slower. Therefore, if you have a collision with a pedestrian, you're less likely to kill or injure that pedestrian. But it's how is that going to be enforced when I know, for example, right outside my door, I live in a 20 mile an hour zone area, and it's never enforced. I've never heard of anyone, and so that just seems a bit of an unfortunate situation where it's never enforced, and never been dealt with. So it's there, but it's not there because everybody just ignores it basically. Where you've had in Wales, for example, where you've got the 20 mile an hour speed limits right across the country, the feedback from people who are concerned about it is it's causing a lot of congestion, and in some cases, if you speak about and this was mentioned at the pre-agenda, a lot of roads where you have a 30 miles an hour speed limit, but there's a lot of parked cars, that naturally slows down traffic anyway. There's a natural traffic calming effect here from the amount of vehicles that are parked on roads. But if you take main roads, and I know the 100 that wouldn't be touched would be roads, I suppose, like for example, the main roads between through Fernagare, or I don't know, lots of different places where it would be a bit unthinkable. But a lot of people, myself included, would regard a lot of the other roads that may not be included in the 100 as a bit unthinkable. So I just don't think it's practical, Susan. I don't think it's workable, and I think if you're going to reduce, you're going to cause more congestion than it's designed for. It's designed for road safety, or it's been brought in for road safety reasons. And I'm all for road safety, of course. I'm sitting here as a chair of the Road Safety Forum, but I don't necessarily agree with the level of the changes that they're speaking about here.
Okay, I take your point. I just wondered what your concerns were there, but I completely take that. But I'm looking at those figures as well, and I was delighted, thinking, oh, brilliant. There's, going to be so many more. I was thinking that's a great thing.
Yeah.
But I take on your points. I see that, but I mean, I don't know what the way around that is. I mean, and you talk about them being enforceable. Who's going to enforce them? Police resources are, in rock bottom as well, so I don't know how that's going to be enforceable. How do you change people's habits? How do you get people to drive? But I have heard you mention before, David, about, because you're quite very knowledgeable about roads and stuff, which I'm not myself, but I've heard you, and I've always kept this in mind. A 30 mile an hour road, people tend to go just over 30. If it's a 20, yes, they'll probably go, you know, not abide by the rule, but they're unlikely to go over 30. So I've always had that in my head. So I think 20 is better than, you know, it's better to try and get people to cut their speed.
Yeah, I'm obviously going to agree with that because, and we've had discussions with officials about this. If the speed limit's 40, you're going to get people doing just over 40. But if you reduce it to 30, and they're not going to do 30, but it's less than 40 and it's safer, therefore, if you have an accident, it's going to be less of an impact. And that just carries on down the field. But it's what's practical, it's the level. Almost every 98%, it means you're just bringing the whole area down to a 20 mile an hour speed limit. Now, I know, sorry. Yeah, Colin Park's wanting to come in here as well, and I'll bring in Colin in a second, but yeah, I'm not going to disagree with comments that I've already made. Yes, it's true, and I've had this discussion with officials. You know, people, you know, there's a very, very small amount of roads that have got 20 mile an hour speed limits and they're not enforced. So when you're bringing in that level of roads, it seems, and no disrespect to the police here because they're under-resourced as you mentioned, but it's almost farcical that you're making a law but it's never going to be enforceable. So anyway, I've made enough comments on that. I'm going to, sorry, on you go Susan, yeah?
Well, the other thing that was mentioned at the end there was the funding, you know, I mean, when's it going to happen? Because the money's not there. And it's, you know, I mean, what was the percentage, the figure that South Lanarkshire got? 80, sorry, I can't find it right now. What money would they? Where is it? Sorry.
The
84,000. That's not going to go very far. And as you say, external funding will have to be found, and if and how long and what proportion of all that can take place, depending on the amount of funding that's available. So.
The 84,000 funding that we currently have is for the assessment process only. So that's just the feedback to Transport Scotland. With that information from us and all the other local authorities, a figure will be put on the implementation costs for future funding.
So, okay, so I'm going to ask Colin, he's hand up to speak. Colin Park.
Thanks, Chair. Hopefully you can all hear me okay.
Yeah.
We can. So this has been a very topical debate for the last couple of weeks. I'm also part of the Scots Exec Group and we've been liaising with Transport Scotland in relation to this, and that's why we brought this paper today. There's a number of options available as Sandy has set out in terms of a national approach and or a local approach. And I think the debate that we had, Councillor McLachlan, last week or the week before at Agenda, I think it was useful because there was a whole load of topics discussed. Councillor Kerr's points there are well made as well in terms of enforcement. However, you know, 30 mile an hour people will tend to speed at present. 20 miles an hour will speed a little bit less, hopefully. And if you reduce speeding, whatever level it is, the severity of accidents, should they occur, will be less. This paper doesn't propose a thing though, and I think that's an important thing to get across here. It does not propose a thing in terms of, all it does is provide members with an update on the options that could happen. If Transport Scotland go ahead and propose the national approach and they put the secondary legislation in place that's required, essentially some of the figures that Sandy and Stuart have talked about in that paper is what could happen overnight. Now we need to continue to work with Transport Scotland, as do the other 31 local authorities, to make sure that those roads that may not be eligible or suitable for 20 miles an hour are retained at 30 or are retained at the other speed limits now. So this paper doesn't propose a thing. Councillor Kerr's point about funding, if it comes with a national approach and it comes with legislation, it will be supported with a financial memorandum which will guarantee and provide councils with funding necessary to implement. That's mostly that approach in terms of any new legislation. If it doesn't come that way and it's left to local authorities to deliver themselves, it'll only go as fast as the resources that are available, which may also include funding from Transport Scotland and Scottish Government, but we may not have the resources to do it. and we won't get the same approach as the drink drive ban or the seatbelt ban, in the 70s and 80s. And so certainly as a professional body, Scots, we have been looking to encourage Transport Scotland to get that big bang, to get that overnight national implementation across Scotland. However, that comes with challenges as well. As Councillor McLachlan said, that would mean, I think it was 4,000 roads would by default become 20. Now that is not a bad thing, but it's a bad thing if some roads that say businesses or buses use, maybe key arteries in and out of towns, haven't been suitably assessed. So this is just an update paper to set out some of the context, some of the parameters that we're working to, and really for us to watch this space, Chair. The debate's ongoing with Transport Scotland. I'm on holiday just now, but I picked up another email on Friday there with one of my colleagues at Transport Scotland looking to discuss it with me. So we'll look to kind of update the forum as much as we can in the coming weeks and months, and we'll bring a paper probably to a forum early in 2024. So happy to answer any other questions. Thanks for kind of asking me to come in early there, Chair, but I'm here to answer any other points. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Colin. And some of the points you made there, like bus routes, for example, and it's getting back to Susan's question. If you take, for example, on the A9, there's a trial 50 miles an hour speed limit for trucks, where traditionally trucks are only allowed to do 40 miles an hour in a single carriageway. But if you've got a motorist behind that can do 60, they get quite frustrated, and this is why they're piloting this now to see if it's reducing the accidents because of the amount of people overtake. Now, in my job as a driving instructor, I can be sitting at 30 miles an hour because that's what you've got to teach your pupils to do. And the amount of people that try to overtake, now they're breaking the law when they do that. And it's just my personal view. I'm not the professionals are sitting around the table. It's my personal view. If you're going to, for example, just take, I'm just plucking a road out of thin air here. If you take the roundabout, say at Drumsagard, all the way down to halfway to Cambuslang, imagine slowing down to 20 miles an hour along that road. Now that might be one of the 100 roads that doesn't get affected, but if you have to drop your speed, and if I'm a driving instructor, we know what to say, if it's a 20 limit, people will do 25, and that's better than 30. But I can't let my learners drive at 21, 22 just because, you can go a little bit over the limit. Imagine sitting at 20 miles an hour on a road like that. You'd have a queue of people ready to lynch you, and that in itself would encourage people to make unnecessary, illegal overtaking. And this is, it's just part of a big mix as to why I've got concerns about that. So I'm going to ask Ralph to come back in, to come in here. You get your hand up, Ralph.
All right. Thanks, Chair. And it really follows on from the comments you made yourself, Chair, about the practicalities. Now, this is Transport Scotland proposals. One of the things the Minister always tells constituents is that they give guidance. And to some extent within this council, we tend to take the guidance as absolutely statutory. So you have to remember it's guidance. And one particular thing is the minimum length of 20 mile an hour limits. Well, obviously, if all built-up areas are going to be 20 miles an hour, we're really not going to have that. But if we have lengths of 20 miles an hour which are longer, maybe a rural school, then motorists think sensible. They're not going to stick to it. But the whole thing is enforcement. The real advantages only come with enforcement. There is this view about average speeds. It's not the average speeds we're concerned about, it's the maximum speeds, the people who just take no notice. I don't think those drivers change their view. If it's 30 mile an hour, they'll do 40. If it's at 20 miles an hour, they'll still do 40. As the Chair says, in 20 miles an hour area, 20 mile an hour limits, I've been overtaken. I wouldn't say frequently, but not uncommonly.
Yeah.
Well, they don't overtake you at 25 miles an hour. No, they go to 40 miles an hour to get past you quickly. That's the natural thing. So I don't know how we enforce it. and without enforcement, the advantages are not there. Pedestrians cannot rely on slow traffic because there's going to be, fast traffic. The other practical thing is, if people do it 20 miles an hour, you tend to have a whole row of vehicles doing 20, and there's nowhere to cross the road. But what I would point out, and I know, I've spoken to Colin about this in the past. Other councils have had more 20 miles an hour limits than we have. Borders and West Lothian. And West Lothian did about 2 years of 20 miles an hour practically everywhere in built-up areas, even in A roads. They consulted and they put them back to 30 miles an hour. And in Borders, where they had a long stretch of 20 miles an hour, they've now cut it back because you can see that maybe drivers slowed down at the difficult bits. But as soon as they got a bit of open road, even though it's a built-up area, they just speed it up. So we've got to take into account these roads authorities that have had 20s and they've decided to go back to 30. And I do have to say, I've not seen any problems caused by them going back to 30. I want to see speeds come down in general, and certainly speed limits enforced. But there doesn't seem to have been a problem where they have gone back to 30. We're not talking about back streets and residentials. It's where main roads go through towns. Right, any comment on that? Thanks,
Thank
Chair.
you, Ralph. I see, Colin, you want to come back to respond to that?
Thanks, Chair. Just in conscious there's other councillors as well, but just to kind of pick up Councillor Barker's point there, this is not, if Transport Scotland progress with the national approach, it's not guidance, it's law. It's an act. It's the same as the speed limits, the national speed limits just now with 30 miles an hour across the UK. So it's not something we could choose not to. If they don't take the national approach, then it would be left to us as local authorities to still do the same due diligence, make sure the roads that we are considering for 20 miles an hour are appropriate, and we promote that through a TRO, and that would again become law. So it's not guidance here. So, and the last point there, Councillor Barker was talking about Scottish Borders, Edinburgh City, they've done it as well. Highlands are looking through it just now, so we're in close contact with South Lanarkshire, and Scots are in close contact with Scottish Borders. What they are doing is they're not returning everything that took from 20 back up to 30, they're refining and they're learning. And a lot of what they put in place was put in place during COVID, using Spaces for People funding, and they saw some real benefits. Clearly some areas maybe they didn't get sufficient benefits, or there was maybe a wee bit of backlash, so they're refining it. So I don't have the stats to hand. Stuart or Colin or Sandy might have, but Scottish Borders have seen some noticeable reductions in the speed of vehicles. So again, sorry Councillor Barker, I don't fully agree with your point. Enforcement's a problem now on some of our roads. I'm sure police colleagues who are maybe on the call today would agree. But there'll be some people you can't tackle at all. They'll continue to speed. There is some clear evidence emerged, not just in Scottish Borders, but down in Wales as well. The reduction in the speed limit does change the behaviour of the drivers on the route, and you do see speed reduction, but it has to be on appropriate roads, and not every road, Councillor McLachlan, I agree with you in that, not every road is appropriate for a 20 mile an hour speed limit, but many roads are, and we must remember we're here today at the Road Safety Forum. One of the policies the council has adopted within a local transport strategy, and certainly in the updated local transport strategy that we'll bring to Community Enterprise early in 2024, we will be proposing to retain a policy and an action and a direction for the council that will look to introduce 20 mile an hour speed limits in appropriate locations, whether it be outside schools, within our town centres, etc, etc. So let's not lose sight of reducing speed limits saves lives and reduces the severity. Thank you, Chair.
I don't think anybody would lose sight of that, Colin, and something that's made mention to you at at the agenda meeting, yeah, you can bring proposals forwards, but there's an old adage, and it was an old politician who's no longer with us. Officials can advise, but politicians will decide. So if people want to come with proposals, then that's what they are, they're proposals. And if there's opposition to that, Colin, that's why elected members are in position. And if something's enforced by law, then we don't have much of a say on that. But this is a forum where people can have their views, and I hear your view. We agree in a lot, but we sometimes disagree. But I certainly don't agree with this blanket policy as it's coming across to us. It's not your words, I know that. It's coming from Transport Scotland and Scots and various professional bodies who bring these things to us. But it's here to be discussed, and if it goes to Enterprise Resources, I would hope that the views of this forum, if it's a kind of general feeling within the forum, that would be considered when it's been brought forward to the Enterprise Resources Committee, which I'm a member of as well. Carl Johnson Dempsey.
Thank you, convener. So, first of all, sorry if there's any noise. I do have workers in my kitchen, which is directly below my office. I'm generally supportive on safety grounds of reducing, but I do agree with your concerns. Reinforceability. I live in a 20-mile-an-hour school zone. Both main streets in my ward are 20-mile-an-hour zones, and I'd agree that you quite often see people exceeding 20 mile an hour, and I don't think I've ever saw anyone have any form of rebuke for that. My question, however, is on section 9. I was living in Edinburgh, and I believe around 2016ish, when they moved to a large number of the roads, almost all of them, to 20 mile an hour zones, and there was a lot of debate at the time whether that was a good move environmentally. Obviously, driving at slower speeds does use less petrol, and that's good, but there's also debate around how much waiting you'd be doing, and whether there'd be more idling, wasting petrol that way. So I mean, I don't know the answer. So I was hoping that in this report we would see something that section 9 discussing that, because obviously that is the section for climate change and environmental implications. So I was just wondering if there had been any work done to assess the environmental impact of reduced road speeds. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very good point, and it's one that I've had discussions with people about. You know, the slower you go, the more MPG you get, the less engine revs, etc., etc. But there's a balance to be struck, because when you consider where there's congested traffic, slow-moving traffic, the pollution is higher, and I don't know if that's because they're going so slow or sitting at mostly stationary with engines running and so on. But that's a very valid question, and I wonder. The answer isn't in the paper. I don't see it, but I wonder if there's.
It's not, no.
No. So is that number 7, Stuart? Stuart's going to attempt to address that question, Cal.
Yeah, that is an interesting point, and it is something that we have been looking into. Some of the evidence that's out there suggests that dropping the speed limits doesn't necessarily create any environmental issues. It more or less balances out. Mm-hmm. And one of the papers I was reading recently, it talks about where, if you're driving a petrol or diesel car, where at what point do the pollutants become more, and it's really in the acceleration. So if you're accelerating from 0 to 20, or from 0 to 20 obviously, to 30, the higher the speed you accelerate to, then you're creating more pollutants. And I think, as you said, if you're travelling at a set speed, then you're not going to be churning out as much emissions as you would be if you were accelerating and consequently decelerating to speed up again. So if you're travelling at a more steady speed, then that helps.
Yeah, I understand that as part of the driving test. There's a box on the test sheet, and it comes under eco-safe driving. And I wonder what the safe is, but I wonder if it's safe to the environment that they're speaking about. But it's how hard you accelerate, how long you brake. You know, if you see, for example, traffic lights up ahead at red, you might as well lift off the gas, because if you go up to the traffic lights and you stop, you then use a lot more energy to get started again. And that's the point that you're making. When you're moving from 0 to get moving, that takes more energy, therefore it takes more fuel, therefore you've got more emissions coming out the back of your car. So a good steady speed is probably the best way, but what is the best speed? I'm not sure. I don't know if it's 20, I don't know if it is, Carl. I suspect it might be just a bit higher than that. Certainly, you're going to get better MPG at 40 than you are at 70. That's just a fact. But going down to 20, is it going to be better? We don't know. There's more science to be done on that, I suppose. Does that kind of address your question there, Carl?
Almost, it's more just on whether or not more cars driving at lower speeds does create more weighting, which obviously would therefore be wasted fuel rather than the fuel. But I accept that the officers may not have an answer to that in the room. It's just in future, obviously, we have these kind of standard sections in our reports, and it'd be good if things like that could be considered. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. I've got Norman Ray. Norman.
Thanks, Chair. I'm more in favour of these kind of things, perhaps, than you are. Perhaps because I'm a pedestrian rather than a driver, I suppose there's an element of that. And also thinking about in my own ward, there's quite a lot of, I suppose, quite old built-up streets that maybe aren't suitable for the sort of volumes and speeds of traffic that are now using them. So in that sense, I see this kind of approach as being quite encouraging to maybe help to address some of the problems that people bring to me about those things. I mean, I understand that the point that you make about enforcement, that obviously in many of these cases people complain about people speeding anyway at the existing speed limits. I suppose perhaps the thinking behind it would be that if you change this on a large scale, then over time people will change their behaviour, or most people will, and drive at lower speeds, even if maybe initially they don't obey it. Whether that turns out to be the case or not would obviously remain to be seen. I was particularly interested and quite encouraged with the place criteria, which seem to cover many of the kind of areas that I'm talking about in my ward, places where perhaps there are schools on the street or halls or other community facilities. And also I'd kind of assumed that A and B roads wouldn't be included, that automatically they would be outside of this. So I was quite encouraged that they might be considered where relevant for the reductions. But I suppose I would agree that it obviously depends on location and the type of road and so on, whether a 20 mile an hour limit would actually work or not. But certainly I'm quite encouraged by that. Thanks.
Thank you, Norman. Julia Mars.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite interested to hear this debate, to be fair, because a lot of the arguments raised today against the 20 mile an hour proposals are very similar to those that were bandied about when the town centre and around schools COVID-funded 20 mile an hour limits were brought in. And I have to say that I've not had one single person ever come to me and say that they think that, the 20 mile an hour limit around schools should be lifted and people should be allowed to go faster. That the arguments for town centres were primarily an ask for extension, actually, and for more streets to be included. And if there was any criticism, it was a concern about the change of speed limits across a relatively small area, which I can understand. And that's where I wholeheartedly agree with this proposal, because whilst I absolutely can understand that the Police Scotland can't be everywhere, and that enforcement will be important. And the frank truth is that some people will be of a minded to speed regardless of what the rules are. The reality is this is about behavioural change, another pillar of road safety and moving towards lower injuries and deaths, not just enforcement, and having consistency across a network. And I'm smiling slightly because officers will know I have several bees in my bonnet about where I consider roads not to be consistent. However, consistency across the network and having that behavioural change where there's an expectation in a built-up area, and this is not about open roads. So there's no concern in my mind that you're going to do 20 along an open road where there is no built-up properties or amenities. That this is about the consistency when you're in an area where there would be pedestrians to have an expectation to slow your speed, and regardless of the enforcement, putting that aside for the moment. That behavioural change, I think, is really important, because you could spend an entire national budget on Police Scotland, and I'm afraid some people would still be able to speed where they shouldn't. What I would say, and I would quite like this to be considered going forward, is that 100 metres walk around key amenities and schools. For the rural areas, I think that some discretion could be applied. It may not always fit where you may have a village where it is more than 100 metres away. There may not be key businesses or churches, but if there's an expectation of children walking to school, I think that would be an important point to raise. So perhaps whether the area is a safe walking route to school could also be included in the proposals going forward.
Julia, thanks very much for that, and appreciate your comments, and I agree with a lot of what you said. I don't necessarily agree with all of what's been suggested in this report. Of course, I'm happy with the 20 mile/hour speed limits around schools and appropriate areas, but it's the appropriateness of and the scale. You mentioned, of course, they're not going to have them on open roads, but when you consider 98% of all roads within South Lanarkshire being reduced from 98% of 30 mile/hour speed limit roads being reduced down to 20, that's going to take in an awful lot of open roads. I just wonder, and this is something that can be fleshed out a bit if and when this actually comes, probably when, the way that Colin was speaking earlier. So there'll be a lot of discussion, there'll be a lot of input from members, particularly in their local areas, members on this forum, but members in their local areas will obviously have a lot to say about that, and it'd be wrong of me to be sitting here as chair of the Road Safety Forum if I wasn't considering road safety. There was a really good graph shown earlier on there about the reduction in accidents. Technology was mentioned from Ralph, maybe be a reason why, but there's all sorts of reasons why, and a lot of good work has been done by this council and other councils across the country, and we welcome that. It's just the severity of what's being suggested here. The number just jumps right out the page at me, Julian, and I would just like to see a bit more. I mean, it's early, it's very early, this is the first I've seen this, so I'd just like to see a bit more discussion, a bit more detail in how these roads are going to be chosen. There is some detail on it, and obviously I've done quite a lot of work on that, and I've come up with these figures based on the guidance from Transport Scotland. So, and I see Colin's come back in, so John Anderson and Julie, I'll bring you back, but Colin's want to respond by the looks of it. Carry on, Colin.
Thanks, Chair. Again, this is a useful debate. It's very similar, Councillor McLaughlin, to what we had the other week there at the agenda. And just kind of sitting and listening to today, I actually think it's everybody's points are all valid, and it's for us as officers to take whatever comes forward, whether it be the national approach or for us as officers to progress and develop initiatives with members, with our communities. I think we can achieve it all, and we can still achieve the goal of reducing speed limits, improving safety, reducing severity. So it is really good and informed debate, and yeah, there's nothing, again stressing here, there's nothing in the paper that we are proposing today. It's purely an update, and all of the points that have been made today can guide and direct this moving forward. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Colin. John Anderson.
Thanks, Chair. I think there's a point here. Forgive me that I've got a bad chest infection if I'm not coming across very well here. But 3.1 has made it quite clear it's a national target and measures for casualty reductions. Now, I think that's the most important thing that we need to keep in mind. The other debate here was played out in Wales, and those opposed to it down there gave the same reasons. The other week, question time came from Clondudno in Wales, a place I know well because I've got a friend down there who, like you, is a driving instructor, who was totally opposed to the introduction of 20 miles per hour. But on the programme, they gave the statistics for the road accidents since it was introduced, and the amount of accidents that were prevented, and even some fatalities that were prevented on the chart because of the reduction from 30 mile to 20 mile an hour. It was really, really startling. And I think that's what we've got to bear in mind here. This is what it's all about, is reducing accidents and fatalities on our roads. So I am in favour of it. I know there will be problems with it. Also noticed though in Wales that they're actually going back and putting some of them back to 30 mile an hour. And I think if we are going to do it, I think we need to make sure we get it right and get it right first time, and not be putting up, changing it from 30 to 20 and then back from 20 to 30 and confusing people. And I think the fact that it is a national, and I think the idea behind it was no matter where you went in Scotland, you would know if you're a bit up there, you're on 20 mile an hour, because there seems to be a bit of a difference in some areas as to people when you're travelling about, whether you're a 20 or a 30 or a 40 or whatever in different parts of Scotland. I think we've got to keep that in mind, that the reason it's been introduced is purely to reduce traffic accidents and fatalities. Thanks.
Thanks, John. I think it goes without saying, you know, the name of the committee, the name of the forum is a bit of a hint. Of course, the aim is to reduce casualties and accidents as much as we can. But I'm interested in what you said about the debate that take place. I'm surprised at such an early stage, because when we looked at some of the charts and the figures that we had presented to us earlier, they're based over a 3-year period. It's only just a matter of months since it's been implemented in Wales. I'm quite surprised that there cannot be such accurate statistics. And how can you suggest that? I'm not asking you this. I'm just rhetorical question. How can you calculate how you've prevented a fatality when you need to be trying and imagining where it might have happened or not? I don't know. So I think the jury's out on that for a bit, but it's interesting that people, for example, one of my driving instructor colleagues who you know in Wales is not in favour of it. But the point was made earlier as well by Ralph and Colin, where 20 mile an hour speed limits had been implemented and brought back to a 30 for different reasons. We don't know the reasons. I suspect it's because of the amount of backlash and pressure, similar to what's happening in Wales. And the fact that it was on question time shows that it's a big issue up for debate. Julie, I see you want to come back in.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I think that our difference of opinion is largely based on what is an open road. And I can't think of a single open road in my ward that is a 30 mile an hour. In fact, there are 40, 50, 60 miles an hour. Now, I realise that my ward is very rural compared to yours, but I wonder whether to try and define this better and try and answer some of your concerns, perhaps, the officers could maybe even bring examples of an open road that is actually a 30, because I can't think of any at the moment, but it would certainly help me to know of any particular open roads that are currently a 30 and are likely to be picked up by this proposal. And it might help all of us to have comfort that the proposal's appropriate. And also, I would point to 5.5 in the report that notes following assessment that a sense check would of course be ongoing, I could imagine, but certainly a sense check so that you have that consistency across the network.
Thanks, Julia. The term open road, I think, is a rather subjective one. I mean, everybody could have a different opinion on that. Everybody's got an opinion and they're welcome to, without being rude to anyone. But I wonder if I could ask, one of our roads colleagues if they could try and address that, since you raised that as a question. What does an open road mean? You know, if you can define that. Is there anyone?
The term open road is not one that we use in an engineering basis, but if you look at paragraphs 4.7 and 4.8 in the report, you'll see the criteria that's been placed to assess all our existing 30-mile-an-hour roads. So if you look at it, 100 metres of any educational setting, 20 or more residential properties over a continuous road length, close to a hospital, church, place of worship, etc. If you look at all these criteria that have been considered, none of them would constitute an open road. You know, all applying that criteria would rule out any roads without those bits of criteria.
Okay. Thank you, Sandy. So I don't have any more questions, so can we just agree to note that report?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda, number 5, is Education, Training and Publicity Initiative, and that's pages 19 to 24. Colin Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to advise a forum of the ongoing education, training and publicity initiatives within South Lanarkshire. And Section 3 sets out a number of these initiatives for your information. The first one being 3.1, the Junior Road Safety Officer Scheme, where we look to appoint pupils in primary 6 or 7 to be GRSOs within their school to promote road safety, taking part in national campaigns and also working with their school community and doing a bit of peer education, using national materials but also looking at any local needs that they have as well. We have 116 schools that are taking part during this current academic year. That's approximately 281 junior road safety officers in place, along with an adult coordinator to assist them in their role. An open day was held on the 12th of September, and from the schools taking part, 81 were able to join the day, so with 189 junior road safety officers join us at that event. Everything that took part of that event, including our partners that attended, are detailed within the sections thereafter. We continue to offer support to our GRSOs to support them throughout the calendar year with materials to take part in national campaigns as well as to address any local issues that their school have identified. Within section 3.2, it highlights the Road Safety Annual Calendar competition, which has recently been through the judging process. The competition topics are detailed in section 3.2.2, and it also shows that we received 3,230 entries from 96 schools to the Traffic and Transportation section, which then went through a 2-stage judging process. So I can announce today and let you know that the overall winner is Ruby Coy from Muir Edge Primary School in Uddingston, and she's a Primary 6 pupil. What I'll do, I'll email out the members of the forum the full winners list along with illustrations after this meeting. So calendars will be distributed during December and into January 2024 to offices and across council buildings and schools. Section 3.3 details Bikeability Scotland cycle training, which again is offered out to every primary school. Within the Traffic and Transportation section, we coordinate level 1 and level 2 of the programme, as well as putting on instructor training courses. So we qualified 25 candidates as instructors on the recent courses that we had, and we are obviously in communication with our primary schools at this moment in time, with many having undertaken training so far. The majority of training takes place during the spring-summer months and will report on the full academic year when the school year concludes. 3.3.8 details just the bikes and helmets that remain available to schools to borrow to allow inclusion of pupils that don't have them. And just to kind of put a figure on that, section 3.3.9 shows that across the last academic year, 49 bikes were accessed by 17 schools just to allow pupils to be included within the training taking place. And a 5-year progress chart is detailed within the report here as well, just showing the number of schools taking part in which levels. Section 3.4 details the WOW Walk Once a Week travel tracker scheme by Living Streets, which we are undertaking with approximately 20 schools at the moment. where they register their journeys on a daily basis, and if they walk sustainably once a week for that month, they're rewarded with a WOW badge. So again, that's a good scheme to take part in, and there's a link there for further information. Section 3.5 details Go Safe is Ziggy's road safety mission. Ziggy is the lead character by the Scottish Government in their road safety campaign for young road users, so those from the nursery stage into primary 1. And that's to encourage a partnership working approach between educational establishments and the home. And these resources feature stories, activities, ideas, games, online stuff, printed materials and promotional materials to get across the road safety message to our young people. The main resource is 6 stories that are available in a big book format, and also small books can be ordered for establishments to give home to pupils as well. So again, the order form has been distributed across our local network within South Lanarkshire, and they can access these materials free of charge. In terms of this report, there are no employee implications involved with this report. Financial implications, item 3.3, Bikeability Scotland cycle training. We received a fund by Cycling Scotland for the last 2 academic years, which are detailed within section 5.1, which allows the continuation of a post to support Bikeability Scotland training, as well as meeting the cost of the many activities which we undertake as part of that scheme. In terms of item 3.4, the WOW scheme, that's been jointly funded through air quality funding and Smarter Choices, Smarter Places Fund. All other items were funded by our own resource, our own revenue budget and by external partners. There's no other significant implications in terms of this report, and would ask the forum just to note the contents of the report and that future road safety education, training and publicity activity be supported. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Colin. I've got to thank, it was my colleague here who reminded me that I should thank for the amount of materials that have been provided. It's excellent to see all of that, and unfortunately for the people joining online, you don't have the benefit of enjoying seeing all the materials and equipment that are there. Very interesting, the Your Speed device there. It's a mobile one, and it can be placed anywhere you like, I suppose. It's not enforceable, but it just informs drivers of their speed. So I think I would like to see that utilised. I've never seen it out on the road, to be fair, Colin, but I would quite like to see that being used more frequently in different areas, you know, especially around the schools and in areas where there is 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, just to make the point, look, this is a 20 limit, look, you're doing 30, and it's like the walk of shame, because if you're driving up and that thing is flashing towards you, showing what your speed is, it's a lesson to people who may not be sticking to the speed limits. So thank you very much for your report there, Colin. I see Julia's got her hand up. Julia?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. And if with your indulgence, Chair, the congratulations of the Road Safety Forum could be passed to the winner of the Road Safety Calendar, and all the entrants that were judged were of an exceptional standard, and well done to the winner there. I haven't declared an interest on this paper because it's for noting rather than decision, but I do have a connection that my daughter is a current junior road safety officer, a chip off the old block, some would say, so pity help them. But I'm very aware of the support and the event at Châteauroux that my daughter and others have attended. I've been there myself previously, and it is very, very good and absolutely to be commended. I wonder what further support within, obviously, resources, officer resource, could be offered with the junior road safety officers within schools to have more nuanced and local events, because our schools are so diverse in their road safety issues. I wonder, how much support can be offered there, and also partnership working with local police and the Walk to School week.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh, for the comments there. That's nice to hear. Certainly in terms of local events, what we would tend to do with individual schools is work with them on an individual basis. Our event at Shatler was to pull all junior road safety officers together, along with a number of different external partners to give them information up front. But thereafter, during the academic year, we'd look for junior road safety officers to undertake that role, and they take the responsibility of planning out their future year, what topics, what themes they want to include and work on. And then they can work with us on that, and we can link them to any resources that we have, provide them with any of the equipment that we've shown today, and as well as working with any other external partners, whether it's police or any of our sustainable travel charity partners as well, just link them in as much as we can to ensure that we are meeting them at their needs and looking at their focuses. So I don't really think it would be local events that we'd look to organise, but more just the individual support to the local schools that really meets their conditions in their locality.
Thanks, Colin. Yeah, we've got no more hands, so we'll agree to note the report. And of course, congratulations to Rudy Coy. So this is recorded, so if that winner, well done, congratulations, great effort. And I look forward to seeing you. We'll be coming, I'm sure we'll be getting something organised, Colin, myself and Councillor Brown, as we did the last time. So I look forward to meeting you and shaking your hand, and well done. So the next item, so we agree to note that report then?
Agreed.
Agreed. Item 6, we've had a note that Laura Hinshawood has just submitted her apologies. She's injured and she can't attend. The difficulty with the police, they can't use this Confero for security reasons. They could join on Teams, but we're not using Teams. So if there's any questions, they can be passed on to Lorna. And similarly, Gary Tudhop had submitted these apologies as well. So unfortunately, items 6 and 7, we're not going to have a presentation, but if any members have got any questions that they'd like to put to any of these departments, then please pass them to the clerk and we'll get them forwarded to the appropriate person and get you some answers if that's okay. So I have no items of urgent business, so that brings the meeting to a close. Thank you very much, everybody, for your attendance.
Thank you.
Okay.